Hello, everybody. This is Mr. Combs, and in this video, I want to talk about two elements of fiction, and that is setting and point of view. So let's talk about setting first. Harman and Holman define setting as the background against which action takes place. And we can think about the setting as being made up of four different things or aspects. The first is the geographic location. It's topography, scenery, climate, physical arrangement. This is the physical setting. So, for example, is the story set in the woods? Is it set in a city? Is it set in the living room of an apartment? Are there lots and lots of trees? Is it very sparse? So, what is the physical environment? Another aspect of setting is the daily manner of living of the characters. So, do the characters live in luxury? Do the characters live in poverty? Do they struggle? Do they live in a small village? Do they live in a large metropolis? Um, do the characters are they oppressed, or do they experience freedom, relative freedom? The third aspect of setting is the time, and this includes the period in history, the time of year, and even the time of day. So, is this day or night? Is this in the winter, in the summer? Is it at Halloween? Is it at Christmas? Is it set in the current or present day? Is it set in the 1970s? Is it set in the mythic past? What is the time? And then the last aspect of setting, we can think about this as the culture of the characters. So the religious, political, moral, social, and emotional environment. Uh, for example, if you read The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne, that's set in a very strict, religiously um, conservative environment. Where if you commit sin, you're outcast. Uh, if you think about maybe Natural Born Killers, the film, I think that's the title, by Oliver Stone, the moral setting of that film is a little suspect, because you have these characters who live in this morally corrupt world, right, and do these morally corrupt things based on the way that they grew up, or the environment that they're in, right. So when you think about number four, think about that as culture. A way to sum this up is, what is the culture of the setting? And the culture includes the religious, political, moral, social, and emotional environment. So let's consider this breakdown of the setting of The Croods, which is an animated film from a few years back. So the geographic location. So the family lives in a seemingly tropical environment out in the open, only using caves for shelter. The climate is warm and sunny. The scenery is very lush and vibrant. What about the daily manner of living of the characters? Well, the daily life of the characters centers around survival. The characters must hunt for food while avoiding the fantastic prehistoric predatory beasts for which they are constant targets. The historical time period is the distant past, before recorded history, even. There are day and night scenes. And there's not really a religious environment or a political environment, but the family is generally oppressed by the forces of nature, which are greater than they are. Also, the overprotective father creates an environment of fear that discourages adventure and the acceptance of new ideas. So that is more of an emotional environment and more of a social environment. So, When you're looking at the settings of the stories that we have read or that we will be reading, take these 4 aspects of setting into consideration. Now, according to Pickering and Hopper, it is all at its most basic, setting helps the reader visualize the action of the work and thus adds credibility and authenticity to the story. It helps to create and sustain the illusion of life to provide what we call verisimilitude. Now, verisimilitude is the semblance of truth. It is the degree to which a work creates the appearance of truth. So, in other words, a story with verisimilitude is believable. So, if you believe a story, it has verisimilitude. And authors will try to create verisimilitude in different ways. One way authors can increase the believability of their stories, even those with fantastic or supernatural elements, is by describing the setting in great detail, making the setting real for the readers. Also, according to Pickering and Hopper, setting can serve many other functions in a narrative. For instance, it can be used to create a certain mood, as an antagonist or source of conflict, and to affect and or reveal character. So let's look at a few examples. So if you think about the setting of the Tim Burton Batman films, Batman and Batman Returns, the dark urban landscape of those films helps to create the bleak atmosphere of a city on the edge of collapse. So that setting creates a certain mood, the setting of those two films. If you think about the Stephen King written miniseries Rose Red, the mansion from this series becomes an antagonist when it begins to feed on the psychic energy brought to it by Reardon's team. The house begins to expand by itself, and doors open and close by themselves and lead to different rooms at various times in the story. So that's where the setting becomes an antagonist. If we think back to Joe's trip to the woods, I think that was his name, when we talked about plot. And no, not Joe's trip to the woods. Excuse me. I think it was Tom who was splunking, right? Going cave exploring. When he climbs down into the cave and it gets dark and he cuts his hands on rocks, that is the setting of the cave becoming an antagonist as well. Also, if we think about the Parent Trap, not the original 1960s or whatever Parent Trap, but the remake with Lindsay Lohan, the way Meredith reacts to the natural setting during the camping trip in this movie reveals a great deal about her character. So the setting there helps to reveal character. And also, the characters from the HBO show Oz are certainly affected by being in prison. They display character traits they may not have had if not locked up. All right, let's talk about point of view. So, according to Harmon and Holman, the point of view of a narrative is the vantage point from which an author presents the story. So, this is how the story is told. Roberts and Jacobs state point of view can be considered as the centralizing or guiding intelligence in a work, the mind that filters the fictional experience and presents only the most important details to create the maximum impact. In fact, point of view is one of the most important elements of fiction since it determines how the plot, setting, and characters are presented to the reader. Or, as Pickering and Hopper put it, it governs the reader's access to the story and determines just how much he or she can know at any given moment about what is taking place. So, there are various types of point of view. Every work of fiction has a narrator, the person who seems to report the details of the story. But these narrators can take different forms. So, if the narrator is all knowing and all seeing, we say that the story has omniscient point of view. Omniscient narrators are not part of the story they are relating. They can enter any character's mind at will, can tell the reader what any character is thinking and feeling, and can reveal as little or as much as they see fit. If the narration focuses on an individual character, we say that story has third person or limited omniscient point of view. A third person narrative can enter the mind of one character only and can reveal that character's feelings and thoughts. In a story with a third person narrator, the speech and actions of other characters can only be related if they are seen by the character the narrator is focusing on. If the narrator is a character in the story, we say that the story has first person point of view. The narrator of a story with first person point of view will use the pronouns I and we, unlike the omniscient and third person narrators who use pronouns he and she. Sometimes the first person narrator is the protagonist or another important character right in the middle of the action he or she is relating. Other times he or she is a minor character who reports the events of the story from the sidelines. According to Daniel and Saphir, the use of a first person point of view creates immediacy and intimacy. When a story has a first person narrator, the reader must determine whether the narrator is reliable or unreliable. Reliable narrators are those who can be believed, while unreliable narrators may provide the reader with misinformation, either because they want to deceive or they misinterpret events themselves. So Forrest Gump, for example, is an example of the second type of unreliable narrator. At one point in the film, he thinks the Apple Corporation is a fruit company. So Forrest Gump will relate things, and you can't always believe exactly what he says just because of the way that he misinterprets events in his life. Other unreliable narrators will want to deceive the reader on purpose. And if the narrator of a story simply reports events as they happen without commenting on those events or revealing the thoughts and feelings of the characters, we say that the story has an objective point of view. Sometimes, if a story has an objective point of view, the narrator seems absent and the story is moved along by dialogue and action. So, what I want to do now is I want to determine the point of view of each passage. And rather than let you look at these, we'll do all of these together. Just because I want to make sure we get a full understanding of point of view. So let's look at these first two. So the truth was, I was sorry not to have started school the year before. In my innocence, I had imagined going to school meant certain privileges worthy of all my brothers and sisters' complaints. The fact that my lung infection in my fifth and sixth year, mistakenly diagnosed as TB, earned me some reprieve, only made me long for school the more. So in this one, notice that we use the word, or the narrator uses the word I. So I think this is first person point of view. And this seems like the protagonist, right? This seems like it's the story of this child who's longing to go to school, right? So I think that's the protagonist. All right. What about Hecuba had dreamed that the tiny Paris, who lay so quietly in her arms at this moment, had turned into a burning torch that set all Troy aflame. The old woman, a dream prophet, had then said that a terrible end would come to Troy if the baby were allowed to live. I think this is third person limited, omniscient point of view. So we're only seeing the thoughts and the dreams of Hecuba, right? We only see Hecuba, so we focus on one character. What about Colleen gazed longingly out the window, noticing the blue sky and bright sun. She sighed wistfully. A perfect day out. Next to her, Michael fidgeted in his seat, feeling restless. He wondered how time could move so slowly. Mrs. Howell knew she was fighting a losing battle. She breathed a sigh of relief as the final bell rang, signaling the start of summer vacation. So this to me seems like an omniscient narrator, because this person is going in and out, revealing in and out of people's heads, revealing the thoughts of Colleen and Michael and Mrs. Howell. So I think this is omniscient. It was a record-breaking snowfall. The wind gusts blew violently, swirling the snow around and making visibility nearly impossible. A red car slowly inched out of the driveway and proceeded down the roads, slick with ice. As the car approached the stop sign, the driver slowed down. To me, this sounds like it's just a reporting of what is going on. We don't enter the thoughts of any character. We are just, or the narrator, excuse me, is just relating the events that happen. So I think this is an objective point of view. All right, let's look at a couple more. So far, so good, Jake thought. This girl was bugged by cursing and smoking. He had news for her. He intended to do a whole lot of both. He took a long drag on his cigarette and blew the smoke at her again. She turned away and moved down to the other end of the porch steps. Well, I think again this is limited, or the limited omniscient, or the third person point of view, because we only hear Jake thoughts. We don't hear the thoughts of the girl. So third person point of view. For a moment, my mother seemed to hesitate. Her mouth softened and a line deepened between her eyebrows. We stepped in the night and started walking down the mountain in the direction of town, 10 kilometers away. So I'm using my mother and we. So this, I think, is first person point of view. All right, let's look at a couple more. His mind seesawed miserably to and from between the opposite and irreconcilable facts, and he found himself hating Perry for having had the stupid, brilliant idea in the first place. Well, we're only given information about this character, this he. We're not told anything about the thoughts of Perry. I think this might be limited, omniscient, or third person. So third person, limited, omniscient. And the house had that neglected air, as if no one had stepped foot inside for years. The paint was peeling, the garden overgrown, and a pile of yellowing newspapers blocked the entrance to the front door. Again, I think this is just objective. You're just describing what you see. So, objective point of view. All right. Kate gave Jeff Hedges a withering glance. The top math student in the class, he never missed an opportunity to embarrass Kate or put her down. Only that day he had made a fool of her by deliberately drawing the teacher's attention to her when he knew she wasn't listening. What do you think about this one? I think it's basically omniscient, because we see what Kate is feeling, right? Kate is feeling that he had made a fool out of her, that, you could probably observe that, but really, whether or Kate is made a fool of, that's something that she has to think or feel and herself. So we're told what Kate is thinking or what she feels. Um, we're also told, or we're also given some insight about Jeff um, Hedges. He's the top math student in the class. He never missed an opportunity to embarrass Kate or put her down. Um, I think that's probably omniscient point of view. Now, if you had said limited or third person focusing only on Kate, that's probably you could probably swing that too or make a case for that. But I think that this feels like an omniscient point of view to me. But if you had said that it was limited, focusing only on Kate, that's all right as well. And the last thing I wanted to do on my summer break was to blow up another school. But there I was Monday morning, the first week of June, sitting in my mom's car in front of Good High School on East 81 Street. Staring up at the fancy stone archway, I wondered how long it would take me to get kicked out of this place. And of course, that uses I, it is first person point of view. So here's a note about the excerpts from different texts, and here are the works cited and consulted works for this presentation. I hope you found this helpful, and